Stirling Manor, and an imposing bastion of old money and quiet power, had stood for generations as a testament to ambition and an almost sacred family legacy. Its grand halls, meticulously polished, to a mirror sheen reflected not just the morning light, but the unyielding expectations of a dynasty built on shrewdness and an iron will. Yet beneath the veneer of inherited privilege, a darker current had long run twisting the very bonds that were meant to unite. For years, whispers of favoritism and festering envy had clung to the gilded edges of their lives, unseen by the outside world, but keenly felt within the silent, opulent walls. When the first drop of blood fell staining the antique Persian rugs and shattering the carefully constructed peace, it was not a random act of violence from an outside force. It was the culmination of generations of silent battles, of perceived injustices, hardening into an unbreakable, chilling hatred. The patriarchs were meant to formalize his power from beyond the grave, instead became a declaration of war, ripping apart the last vestiges of fraternal affection and exposing the rot within. But in a family where wealth was paramount and loyalty was expected, what hidden manipulative secrets could compel one brother to extinguish the life of another and leave their storied legacy irrevocably stained? A cold autumnal twilight was settling over Stirling Manor, a formidable edifice of inherited wealth and silent influence. Within its grand echoing walls, the first insidious tendrils of dread began to twine around Clara Stirling. Her hand, usually composed and steady, betrayed her burgeoning panic, trembling perceptibly as she dialed her husband Robert's number for the 7th agonizing time. Each unanswered ring, each sterile chime of his voicemail, cinched the knot of ice forming in her stomach. Such inexplicable silence was utterly uncharacteristic of Robert, the meticulous elder son of the recently departed patriarch Arthur Stirling. His day was a precisely choreographed ballet of meetings and commitments, a schedule he adhered to with an almost sacred fidelity. The vast, richly appointed halls seemed to absorb the waning light, their opulent silence now amplifying her profound unease, pressing in on her like a tangible weight. The familiar aroma of polished mahogany and aged leather, typically a comforting scent of tradition and stability, now hung heavy and foreboding. Finally, the insidious certainty that something was terribly wrong solidified, propelling her with a sudden, desperate urgency through the mansion towards Robert's private study. The heavy oak door, usually locked in his absence, yielded with an unnerving, almost too easy click. The scene within was one of meticulously arranged affluence, brutally violated. Robert lay sprawled across the ornate Persian rug, his usually impeccable charcoal suit disheveled, a dark arterial crimson expanding beneath him, soaking into the intricate patterns. A single gleaming letter opener, normally a mere decorative flourish, on his antique desk, now rested abandoned beside his outstretched hand, glinting with a telltale, terrifying stain. His eyes, typically sharp and discerning, stared blankly upward, reflecting nothing but the muted light from the chandelier. There were no obvious signs of forced entry to the mansion itself, no shattered glass, no upturned furniture to suggest a struggle in the otherwise pristine room. The violence had been contained almost surgically precise within the confines of his private sanctuary. Clara's piercing scream, a raw animal sound, ripped from the deepest reaches of her being, tore through the profound stillness of the manor. It shattered the evening air, alerting the affluent suburban neighborhood to an unimaginable horror that had unfolded behind its secluded manicured walls. Within minutes, the quiet street outside was ablaze with the urgent flashing blue lights of emergency vehicles, their relentless strobes cutting through the deepening gloom, painting the grand facade in an unsettling dance of color and shadow. First responders moved with practiced, methodical precision, their grim faces reflecting the gravity of the scene as they meticulously cordoned off the entire property. A life once steeped in privilege and boundless expectation had been extinguished with chilling exactitude. The initial pronouncement from the responding officer, a terse homicide at Sterling Residence Request Homicide Unit and Forensics, injectories hung heavy in the crisp night air. As investigators began to meticulously process the scene, stepping into a world where old money and brutal tragedy now converged, a single, subtly dislodged window pane in a less used side annex came into view. It was a small detail easily overlooked in the initial chaos, yet it immediately hinted at a hidden entry point, or perhaps a meticulously staged element. This quiet anomaly nestled within the opulent quiet of Sterling Manor instantly complicated the narrative steering the investigation towards an unsettling truth. The killer was not an unknown entity from the outside, but someone who knew the manor's secrets, someone who understood its forgotten corners. The search for the truth had begun. Cold clinical report from the medical examiner arrived swiftly, a stark factual counterpoint to the raw emotional landscape that now enveloped Sterling Manor. Robert Sterling's cause of death was unequivocally confirmed: a single forceful stab wound, expertly delivered, puncturing vital organs. But the true wound, the one that bled openly for all to see, was the devastation wrought upon his widow Clara. Her face, etched with profound sorrow, bore the unmistakable weight of a life shattered in an instant. In the sterile confines of an interview room, where the scent of antiseptic battled against the lingering aroma of old grief, Clara Sterling, bearing the unbearable weight of her loss, began to paint a picture of the man who was Robert. Her voice, still fractured by shock, peeled back the layers of a life meticulously constructed under formidable expectations. Robert was not merely the elder son. He was the designated heir, the steadfast pillar of the Sterling family's considerable real estate empire, his entire existence sculpted by the recently deceased patriarch Arthur Sterling. Robert embodied every ideal Arthur had held dear: a sharp intellect, an unwavering loyalty to tradition, and an almost unyielding sense of duty. Her recollections, punctuated by the silent playback of cherished home videos and a collection of sun-drenched photographs, offered glimpses beyond the public persona. In one image, a teenage Robert stood proudly beside his father, a miniature serious replica of the elder Sterling already absorbing the gravity of his future. In another, a rare, relaxed moment showed him laughing gently with Clara in their garden, a soft, almost shy smile gracing his lips, the doting, if somewhat reserved, husband. These were the fragments that coalesced into the true portrait of a man universally respected in his professional circles, a quiet, consistent presence in his community. Clara's voice, thick with sorrow and disbelief, recounted their last conversation. It had been a mundane exchange, a brief discussion about household errands, a reminder of an upcoming business meeting. Now that everyday banality felt like an agonizing memory haunting her with its stark, brutal finality. He was so methodical, so careful, so entirely in control, she whispered, her eyes distant, lost in the abyss of recent memory. He had everything planned, everything accounted for. This just shouldn't have happened to him. It defies everything he was. The Sterling family's legacy was not merely one of wealth. It was a deep-rooted history, their influence within the city's elite extending back generations. Robert had carried the immense weight of these expectations and responsibilities on his shoulders since childhood, a burden he accepted without complaint, transforming it into a badge of honor. To those on the outside, his existence appeared charmed an almost perfect narrative of success and privilege. This perception only intensified the perplexing nature of his sudden violent end. No obvious enemies, no desperate struggles, no clear immediate motive presented itself. The gilded cage of Stirling Manor had become a tomb, its former peace irrevocably shattered. With no apparent threats, and a victim whose life seemed beyond reproach, investigators faced the daunting task of piercing through the gleaming facade to uncover the motive for such a brutal act. Even as the shock of Robert Stirling's murder reverberated through the family and the wider community, another equally potent force began to churn beneath the surface, the formidable, almost spectral presence of Arthur Stirling. The patriarch, though recently deceased, continued to exert his control from beyond the grave, particularly through his last will and testament. This meticulously detailed document, intended to solidify his legacy, instead ignited a powder keg of simmering resentment and unbridled greed among his heirs. Days before Robert's brutal death, a tension-laden gathering took place in the Grand Library of Stirling Manor. As the family and their legal counsel assembled, the atmosphere, usually one of quiet contemplation, bristled with unspoken anxieties. Arthur Stirling's final wishes were laid bare, revealing a stark, unequivocal declaration of his clear preference. The will was heavily skewed in Robert's favor. The elder son was designated the sole executor and primary beneficiary of the vast Stirling estate, a dynastic fortune built on generations of shrewd real estate dealings and ruthless acquisition. His inheritance included the majority shares in Stirling Holdings, several prime commercial properties, and the sprawling manor itself. Marcus Stirling, the younger brother, received a significantly smaller fixed trust fund. Its terms were conditional upon various performance benchmarks, and crucially, its management remained firmly with the estate, effectively placing Marcus under Robert's financial authority. This wasn't merely a distribution of assets. For Marcus, it was a perceived lifelong humiliation, now officially enshrined in legal decree. When Marcus initially presented himself to investigators, his demeanor was a fragile blend of performative grief and barely concealed bitterness. His eyes, though attempting to convey sorrow, held a glint of something sharper, a profound resentment that struggled to remain hidden beneath his carefully composed exterior. Friends of the family interviewed retrospectively spoke in hushed tones of Marcus's long-standing jealousy, a pervasive narrative of perpetually living in Robert's shadow. They recounted his string of failed ventures, his almost pathological financial irresponsibility that had plagued him for years, culminating in a series of desperate attempts to secure loans against future inheritances, always met with Robert's stern, fiscally prudent denials. The will reading itself had been a flashpoint, recounted by witnesses through fragments of tense dialogue. Robert always got everything, didn't he? A family lawyer, Mr. Hayes, recalled Marcus, muttering, his voice laced with a raw venom, his jaw tightened into a rigid mask. Even from the grave, Father is still finding ways to punish me. It's not fair. Robert just watches it all grow while I claw for every scrap. His hand had been clenched into a white-knuckled fist, a tremor running visibly through his arm. The air in the room that day had bristled with unspoken animosity, a heavy, foreboding silence settling after Marcus's outburst. This history of unchecked envy and a desperate craving for validation had metastasized over decades into a profound, almost deadly hatred, laying the groundwork for a deeply personal motive. The raw facts of the will's contents and their immediate volatile fallout painted a clear picture of animosity that in hindsight felt less like a prediction and more like an inescapable prophecy. The stage was thus set for a conflict that transcended mere inheritance. It was a battle for identity, for recognition, and ultimately for a twisted form of justice Marcus believed was due. What actions might a man pushed to the brink of financial and emotional ruin take to reclaim what he felt was rightfully his, or to settle a lifetime of perceived scores? Even as the profound grief and shock from Robert Sterling's murder continued to grip the family and the wider community, a profoundly perplexing new detail emerged, casting an even longer, more ominous shadow over the burgeoning investigation. An imposing custom-built steel safe, typically secured within Arthur Sterling's private study, a space that, following the patriarch's death, had been absorbed into Robert's domain, was inexplicably utterly gone. This was no ordinary vault. It was a legendary family artifact, whispered about for generations as the silent guardian of the Sterling dynasty's most sensitive truths. It was rumored to contain not only vital confidential documents pertaining to the intricate Sterling empire, but also deeply personal, potentially scandalous secrets capable of unraveling carefully constructed reputations alongside a clandestine collection of invaluable, unregistered antique coins. This hidden legacy, a testament to Arthur's secretive nature, was believed to be known only to him and by extension to Robert. Its disappearance was not merely a theft. It represented a gaping void in the very heart of the family's power structure. The absence of the safe, a detail initially lost amidst the raw chaos and immediate aftermath of the murder, now became a critical, almost foreboding piece of the expanding puzzle. Detective Miles Corbin, the seasoned detective, a man whose calm demeanor masked a razor-sharp intellect honed over decades, recognized its profound significance. His initial assessment of the crime scene focused primarily on Robert's body, and the mechanics of the murder now expanded dramatically. He questioned Clara about the safe, her distress palpable as she struggled to recall specific contents or any recent movements. Her fragmented memories, rather than offering clarity, only deepened the chilling mystery. Marcus Sterling's reaction to the safe's disappearance was scrutinized intently by investigators. He feigned surprise, offering a dismissive shrug as he suggested it must have been removed by the estate lawyers as part of the probate process, a claim swiftly discredited by a pointed call to Mr. Hayes, the family's attorney. The meticulousness of the crime scene was starkly evident. While no signs of forced entry marred the exterior of the house, the formidable safe weighing hundreds of pounds had simply vanished from within a seemingly secured manner. This critical absence unequivocally pointed to an insider, someone with intimate knowledge of the Sterling household's intricate layouts, its routines, and its most hidden corners. "This wasn't just a murder, Detective Corbin," declared his voice calm yet imbued with a quiet intensity, his gaze sweeping across the empty space where the safe once stood, its faint outline still visible on the polished floor. "This was a calculated move, a deliberate cover-up. Someone was looking for something specific, and they took it. And they had the audacity to remove a 400-pound steel box from inside a locked residence without leaving a trace outside. The hunt for the missing safe intensified, transforming the investigation from a straightforward homicide into a labyrinthine unraveling of generations of family secrets, unchecked avarice, and the potent, dangerous allure of a hidden fortune. What devastating truths lay sealed within that steel vault, truths worth killing for, and who within the Sterling family possessed the insidious knowledge and cold resolve to claim them? Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose career had been forged through the methodical unraveling of human depravity, now officially spearheaded the investigation into Robert Sterling's murder. With his characteristic precision, he began reconstructing Robert's final hours, meticulously interviewing household staff, wary neighbors, and critically every member of the fragmented Sterling family. Concurrently, the search for the elusive missing safe continued, adding another intricate layer to the already complex case. During his initial interview, Marcus Sterling presented a seemingly impenetrable alibi, a thoroughly documented business trip out of state. He produced flight confirmations, hotel receipts from a luxury resort in Arizona, and the testimony of a purported business associate, Mr. Jeremy Finch, who corroborated their meetings and shared meals. Marcus sat composed, almost detached, recounting his itinerary with an ease that might have swayed a less experienced eye. Yet Corbin's intuition, sharpened over decades of interrogations, detected subtle, almost imperceptible dissonances in Marcus's demeanor, a forced casualness in his laughter, a quick dart of his eyes when asked about his emotional state, a gaze that flickered rather than held when discussing his brother. These minor inconsistencies resonated with Corbin like a false note in a symphony. As the investigation progressed, Marcus's carefully erected facade began to show its first hairline cracks. A deeper dive into his personal finances, triggered by the family's long-standing whispers of his profligacy, unearthed a devastating pattern of escalating debt. This was no mere financial struggle. It was a precipitous plunge into a vortex of crippling gambling addiction. Lavish poker games, clandestine sports betting syndicates, and disastrous failed ventures, each funded by desperate high-interest loans, painted a bleak portrait. He was leveraged to the hilt, facing imminent bankruptcy, his financial life a stark, terrifying contrast to Robert's carefully managed and ever-growing wealth. Loan sharks were closing in their threats, becoming increasingly direct, their deadlines non-negotiable. The chasm between Robert's prosperity and Marcus's desperation emerged as a glaring, undeniable motive, shimmering with the cruel logic of envy and dire, immediate need. "We started digging into his financials," Detective Corbin explained, leaning forward slightly in his interview chair, his gaze unwavering, cutting through the sterile air. "And what we found wasn't just struggling. It was a financial abyss, a bottomless pit of debt. He was drowning, and he was running out of time and options." The financial records laid bare Marcus's true circumstances: several properties mortgaged to their maximum credit lines, completely exhausted, and a looming deadline to repay a six-figure debt to a notoriously unforgiving creditor. Public humiliation, and perhaps even physical danger, loomed. Marcus's alibi, initially accepted at face value, now came under intense scrutiny. Flights were rigorously rechecked, cross-referenced with airport security footage. Hotel receipts from Arizona were matched against electronic keycard data, revealing a suspicious period of inactivity. Highway tolls between Arizona and Sterling Manor were meticulously reviewed, uncovering a critical narrow window during which Marcus's rental car could have conceivably made the round trip. The purported business associate, Mr. Finch, upon further questioning, proved less reliable. His recollection of exact timings blurred, and his own undisclosed financial ties to Marcus suggested a potential motive for perjury. Discrepancies in his story emerged, revealing a carefully orchestrated deception. The cumulative weight of this financial disaster, coupled with the glaring inconsistencies in his alibi, narrowed the investigative aperture around Marcus. He was no longer a grieving relative, but a prime suspect, a man cornered by his own secrets and increasingly desperate choices. The question now was not if the truth would emerge, but when Marcus Sterling's meticulously constructed world of deceit would finally collapse, revealing the fatal link between his ruin and Robert's untimely end. To truly understand the unspeakable tragedy of Robert Sterling's murder, the investigation had to delve deeper than mere financial desperation. It necessitated an unsparing examination of the tortured decades-long history of his relationship with Marcus, a bond forged not in fraternal affection, but in the crucible of deep-seated animosity, a corrosive rivalry that had silently festered since their earliest years, ultimately poisoning the very foundation of their family. Through a poignant collection of faded family photographs, images of two boys initially inseparable their futures, then unwritten juxtaposed with searing recollections and the melancholic testimony of Elizabeth Sterling, their sister, the audience bore witness to the insidious origins of Marcus's profound resentment. Elizabeth, now stepping forward as a secondary grieving family member, offered a broader, more detached, yet equally heartbroken perspective on the family's intricate internal dynamics. Her voice, hushed with a sorrow that transcended anger, painted a vivid picture of a childhood defined by a stark, almost cruel imbalance. She recounted how Robert, the golden child, consistently excelled with an almost effortless grace. His academic achievements were lauded. His athletic prowess celebrated his every success, a source of immense pride for their formidable father, Arthur Sterling. Marcus, by contrast, found himself perpetually overlooked his modest achievements, minimized his struggles, amplified often with Arthur's implicit disapproval. An unspoken yet potent competition pervaded their youth, an emotional chasm inadvertently or perhaps deliberately widened by the patriarch himself, who set impossible standards for Marcus that he could never truly meet. Father never truly saw Marcus, not for who he was. Elizabeth recounted, her gaze distant, tinged with a deep, abiding regret. He only saw Robert, the perfect son, the heir apparent, the one who would carry on the Sterling name exactly as he envisioned. Marcus was always just Marcus. Always a step behind, always trying too hard to be seen. She recalled specific instances from their youth. Robert effortlessly mastering Latin while Marcus toiled over algebra. Robert winning regional tennis championships, Marcus languishing on the reserve. Each perceived slight, each uneven distribution of praise meticulously etched itself into Marcus's psyche, hardening into a core of bitter envy. The chapter starkly contrasted these candid images of two innocent boys playing in the sun-drenched gardens of Sterling Manor with the grim reality of later interviews revealing the gradual, agonizing erosion of their fraternal bond. This decay continued through adolescence and into adulthood, culminating in heated, often public arguments over business decisions, inherited responsibilities, and most recently, the highly divisive and profoundly unfair terms of Arthur's will. Robert's attempts at mentorship or even simple advice were frequently perceived by Marcus as condescension, further fueling his smoldering rage. Detective Corbin, during his comprehensive interviews, spoke with mutual acquaintances who reluctantly confirmed the brothers' ongoing, often vitriolic feuds. These conversations provided further corroboration of the deep-seated friction, painting a picture of a relationship that had become profoundly toxic. One particularly damning account detailed a public altercation at a prestigious charity gala just weeks before Arthur's death. Marcus, visibly fueled by alcohol and a simmering rage, had openly confronted Robert, his words slurred but chillingly clear. "You think you've won, haven't you, Robert?" he'd sneered, his finger jabbing. "Just remember, Father's money can't protect you from everything. You're not invincible." His face, twisted in fury, had been a mask of raw hatred, a profound departure from the sophisticated veneer he usually maintained. This powerful exchange underscored the psychological landscape of a bond defined not by fraternal love, but by relentless competition and a profound, tragic lack of genuine affection. The Sterling family, for all its outward splendor, was built on a foundation of shifting sand, and the sands had finally given way. The painstaking, often monotonous work of the forensic investigators, a meticulous dance of microscopic analysis and chemical reactions, finally yielded a breakthrough. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit laboratory, where hours blurred into days, technicians sifted through every fragment recovered from the crime scene. Clinging stubbornly to the back of Robert Sterling's left hand, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, was a single innocuous hair fiber. Microscopic examination and subsequent DNA profiling confirmed its undeniable origin. It belonged to Marcus Sterling. This infinitesimal yet devastating piece of evidence served as the first irrefutable breach in Marcus's elaborate wall of denial. Simultaneously, investigators meticulously catalogued faint partial boot prints discovered near a less used side entrance to the Sterling mansion, a subtle access point easily overlooked. These impressions, preserved in a thin film of mud and decaying leaves, precisely matched the unique tread pattern of a rare brand of custom hiking boots known to be owned exclusively by Marcus. These twin discoveries began to systematically dismantle his carefully constructed alibi with chilling scientific precision. Marcus's initial alibi had positioned him hundreds of miles out of state, yet an exhaustive review of security footage from various airports' highway tolls and a network of surveillance cameras now exposed a critical narrow gap in his documented journey. This was no mere oversight. It was a clandestine window of opportunity, precisely timed, during which he could have slipped back into the city, committed the heinous act, and then seamlessly rejoined his alibi journey. The hair fiber and the distinctive boot prints, individually small but cumulatively damning, became the crucial unseen threads that directly connected Marcus to the crime scene's silent, irrefutable witnesses that contradicted his vehement claims of absence. Detective Corbin, now armed with tangible physical evidence, felt the investigatory net tightening irrevocably. He stood before his team, a series of magnified images projected behind him, the intricate pattern of the boot print, the cellular structure of the hair fiber. His voice remained calm, yet imbued with a quiet, unshakable conviction. "Every contact leaves a trace," he stated, his gaze sweeping across their faces. He thought he was meticulous, that he'd covered his tracks. But even the smallest fiber, the faintest impression, can tell a story that no amount of pretense can erase. These aren't theories. These are irrefutable facts. Concurrently, the search for the missing safe intensified with renewed urgency. Investigators now firmly believed its contents held more than just financial documents. They could not only further solidify Marcus's motive, but potentially yield the very murder weapon or even a hidden confession. The forensic findings transformed the safe from a mere theft into a vital key, unlocking the final pieces of the puzzle. The tension in the narrative escalated dramatically as the net tightened around Marcus, whose carefully woven tapestry of lies was now under direct, relentless assault from incontrovertible scientific proof. The slow, methodical march of science was inexorably bringing the truth to light, undeniable and absolute. With the undeniable weight of irrefutable forensic evidence now squarely placing him at the scene of the crime, and his once impenetrable alibi riddled with gaping inconsistencies, Marcus Sterling was formally brought in for what would become the most critical interrogation of his life. The sterile, soundproof walls of the interview room offered no escape, only a stark, unforgiving canvas for the psychological chess match about to unfold. Detective Miles Corbin, the seasoned detective, a master of calibrated pressure, orchestrated the encounter with quiet precision. Initially, Marcus maintained his carefully crafted facade of feigned ignorance and detached cooperation. He sat upright, his hands clasped loosely on the table, projecting an almost unnerving calm. "I still don't know who would do this to Robert," he insisted, his voice even devoid of any tremor of fear or grief. "He was my brother, despite our differences." "It's a tragedy." He met Corbin's gaze directly, his eyes attempting to convey sincerity. Corbin, however, was undeterred. Slowly, methodically, with a quiet, almost surgical precision, he began to lay out the accumulating mountain of evidence. He started with the damning financial records, the crushing debts, the loan shark threats, the looming bankruptcy, watching Marcus's expression for any flicker of recognition or distress. Then came the forensic findings, the DNA-matched hair fiber displayed on a clear evidence bag, followed by the distinct boot prints, magnified and shown on a screen, each intricate detail undeniably unique to Marcus's custom footwear. Finally, the meticulously cross-referenced timeline discrepancies unearthed from security footage and his own alibi were presented, revealing the narrow but crucial window of opportunity. The interrogation room, stripped bare of all distractions, save for a table and 2 chairs, transformed into a psychological battleground, a stark arena where truth wrestled with deceit. As each piece of evidence was laid bare, Marcus's meticulously maintained persona began to crack subtly at first, then with increasing clarity. His composed denial gave way to subtle agitation, a series of rapid blinks, a recurring twitch in his jaw, a quick dart of his eyes that now avoided Corbin's steady gaze. Then defensive evasiveness. He attempted to craft increasingly elaborate false narratives, claiming he was simply in the city briefly to retrieve forgotten business documents, or that the hair fiber could have transferred during a previous innocent visit months ago. His lies, however, grew more desperate, more transparent, his body language betraying the profound growing unease that now gnawed at him. He fidgeted his fingers, unconsciously drumming a silent rhythm against the table's edge. "Then why would your hair be on his hand, Marcus, if you were supposedly hundreds of miles away?" Corbin asked, his voice low, deliberately devoid of aggression, yet piercing through Marcus's flimsy excuses like a scalpel. "Why do your unique boot prints match the exact crime scene when you vehemently claimed you were out of state, and why precisely at the time of Robert's death was your rental car logged speeding back towards Sterling Manor, only to return to Arizona hours later, all captured on surveillance?" The psychological pressure mounted each question, a calculated thrust precisely designed to exploit the widening cracks in Marcus's crumbling story. He shifted in his seat, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. His carefully constructed house of cards, built on a foundation of lies and a desperate hope for impunity, was collapsing around him, piece by agonizing piece. The silence in the room stretched thick with Marcus's mounting panic as the truth, inevitable and brutal, began its final crushing ascent. After weeks of intensive, often frustrating, searching the missing safe, the elusive heart of the unfolding mystery was finally discovered. It wasn't hidden in some distant, cleverly disguised bunker miles away, but rather in a disused, overgrown wooden shed on the extreme periphery of the Sterling estate itself, a forgotten structure from Arthur Sterling's earliest days, now almost entirely swallowed by years of neglect and thick ivy. Its revelation was almost accidental, unearthed by a groundskeeper whose shovel struck metal with an unexpected clang during routine brush clearing. Inside the formidable steel box, investigators found more than just the anticipated trove of invaluable antique coins, their metallic gleam dulled by time, and a vast collection of confidential financial documents pertaining to the intricate Sterling empire. They unearthed something far more explosive, a small leather-bound journal. Its pages brittle with age and filled with Arthur Sterling's precise, elegant script, revealed a shocking, manipulative secret that fundamentally reshaped the entire narrative of the Sterling family's discord, a truth previously known to no one. Arthur, it was revealed, had for years been secretly aware of Marcus's extensive and crippling gambling debts. Unknown to his younger son, the patriarch had systematically siphoned substantial funds from Marcus's supposedly ironclad trust fund to discreetly settle his most aggressive creditors. This calculated act, meticulously documented within the journal, had effectively disinherited Marcus long before his official will was even drafted. It had left him clinging to an illusion of security when in reality his financial future was a gaping engineered void. Arthur had been tightening the financial noose for years, all while Marcus remained oblivious. But the journal held an even more venomous sting. Tucked between its final entries lay an unsent typewritten letter, its edges crisp despite its age addressed chillingly to Robert. It laid bare Arthur's profound, absolute disappointment in Marcus, outlining his explicit intention to legally disinherit him completely from the family wealth. The patriarch's final cruel command to Robert was unequivocal. He was to personally deliver this devastating news to Marcus, thereby becoming the harbinger of his brother's ultimate humiliation and ruin. The journal's contents transformed the perceived motive from mere avarice into a furious, desperate act, fueled by a devastating double betrayal. Marcus was undone, not only by his father's long-term secret manipulation, but also by the impending public delivery of this final crushing blow by his own brother. The inescapable specter of complete financial ruin and public disgrace, maliciously orchestrated by his father, now provided the missing, agonizing connection to Robert's death. The safe yielded more than just money or documents. Detective Corbin stated, his voice now heavy with the weight of this new understanding, his eyes reflecting the dark implications of Arthur's revelations. It contained a lifetime of concealed truths, the patriarch's ultimate cruel manipulation, and the precise crushing motive for murder. Marcus didn't merely lose his inheritance. He lost his dignity, his future, and the last shred of trust in his family, all orchestrated from beyond the grave. This discovery provided the irrefutable link illuminating the profound, long-standing family animosity that had culminated in a fatal act of desperation. The carefully documented journal entries, presented with stark, objective narration, allowed Arthur's own chilling words to speak for themselves, revealing a deeper, darker layer to the Sterling family legacy. The intricate puzzle was finally complete, the motive laid bare, leaving only the grim process of justice to unfold. With the devastating contents of the safe now unearthed and the overwhelming forensic evidence meticulously tying Marcus Sterling to the crime scene, the legal hammer finally dropped. Marcus was formally arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his brother Robert Sterling. The news, delivered with cold, unsparing facts by District Attorney Evelyn Reed's office, sent shockwaves through the community, a final brutal confirmation of the Sterling family's tragic downfall from grace. The polished veneer of their public image had irrevocably shattered. District Attorney Evelyn Reed, a formidable prosecutor known for her sharp intellect and meticulous preparation, immediately began to construct her case. Her strategy was clear, almost surgically precise, to weave a damning narrative around Marcus's crippling hidden gambling debts, his decades of festering resentment towards Robert, and the will's catalytic effect, which combined with the devastating revelations from Arthur's journal, had pushed him to the absolute breaking point. She planned to expose not just a murder, but a meticulously planned act rooted in a lifetime of perceived injustice and desperate self-preservation. Reed's team worked tirelessly, assembling an irrefutable timeline of events. They would detail Marcus's surreptitious return to the Sterling estate, pinpointing the critical window established by the alibi discrepancies. Then they would meticulously reconstruct the violent confrontation that must have erupted between the brothers, likely triggered by Robert's impending delivery of Arthur's final humiliating decree and compounded by the search for the safe's explosive contents. The prosecution would argue that this volatile confluence of betrayal and desperation led to the irreversible act of murder. Forensic experts would present the DNA-matched hair fiber and the unique boot prints, each piece of scientific evidence, a silent, unyielding witness. Claire Sterling, Robert's widow, emerged before the cameras following the indictment. Her face, though still etched with profound sorrow, was now hardened by a quiet, steely resolve. Her voice, though still trembling with the raw edge of grief, carried a newfound strength and unwavering demand for accountability. "It's a wound that will never truly heal," she said, her eyes fixed on some distant, painful point beyond the immediate glare of the cameras. "But knowing the truth, understanding the why, it brings a sliver, just a sliver of unimaginable peace. He needs to answer for what he did. Robert deserved that much and more." The narrative now pivoted to focus on the intricate legal proceedings leading up to the trial, detailing the meticulous preparation of the prosecution's airtight argument. Detectives led by Miles Corbin delivered their findings with methodical clarity, building a foundation of irrefutable fact. The defense, meanwhile, would begin its strategic moves and countermoves, attempting to cast doubt, to humanize Marcus, to pick apart the prosecution's carefully constructed timeline. Yet the sheer weight of the evidence seemed insurmountable. The immense emotional toll on the surviving family members was palpable. They now faced the daunting prospect of reliving the nightmare in the unforgiving spotlight of the courtroom, each painful memory and revelation dissected for public consumption. The omniscient narrator provided an objective, almost clinical overview of the complex legal process, detailing the specific charges, premeditated murder, the formal arraignment, and the pre-trial maneuvers that shaped the path to justice. The palpable weight of the impending trial hung heavy in the air, representing not only the community's demand for accountability for such a high-profile crime, but also the Sterling family's desperate last hope for genuine closure amidst their profound loss. The justice for the victim theme now moved into its critical high-stakes legal phase, poised for a dramatic confrontation that would decide Marcus Sterling's fate. The trial of Marcus Sterling commenced, a highly publicized event that captivated the entire community and beyond, turning the local courthouse into a crucible for the Sterling family's shattered legacy. The courtroom packed daily with reporters and morbidly curious onlookers became the stage for a dramatic, often agonizing reconstruction of the crime that had rocked their affluent world. District Attorney Evelyn Reed, with the quiet confidence of a prosecutor, holding a formidable hand, systematically presented her devastating evidence. Forensic reports detailing the microscopic hair fiber, irrefutably linked to Marcus, and the unique boot prints that placed him squarely at the crime scene were projected onto large screens meticulously explained by expert witnesses. Then came the financial records exposing Marcus's dire hidden gambling addiction and his crushing debts, painting a vivid, almost suffocating picture of his desperation. The security footage discrepancies, once subtle, now formed an undeniable narrative of his clandestine movements, a journey of undeniable deceit. Finally, the damning contents of Arthur Sterling's journal, found in the recovered safe, were read aloud, their words a chilling testament to the patriarch's manipulation and the ultimate explosive motive. Each piece of evidence, cold and irrefutable, built an unassailable, inexorable case against Marcus. Claire Sterling Roberts' widow took the stand, her voice initially soft with grief, then growing firm as she delivered a powerful, emotional victim impact statement. Her gaze unwavering and filled with a profound sorrow that transcended mere anger, locked directly onto Marcus across the courtroom. She recounted Robert's life, his inherent goodness, his unwavering sense of responsibility, and the profound, irreparable void left by his brutal absence. "You didn't just take Robert's life, Marcus," she stated, her voice trembling slightly, but resolute. "You murdered a part of all of us. You murdered our family, our future, and any hope for peace. What you did was an act of pure, selfish malice, born from a resentment that devoured you from the inside." Her words, a raw testament to enduring pain, hung heavy in the hushed courtroom, a direct, searing accusation aimed at the man who was once her brother-in-law. Marcus, seated at the defense table, maintained a stony, almost defiant silence throughout the proceedings, occasionally casting furtive, unreadable glances at the jury. His face, though attempting to betray nothing, held a flicker of desperation, the visage of a man cornered by a truth he could no longer escape. The defense, struggling against the overwhelming evidence, attempted to portray Marcus as a victim of paternal manipulation and financial mismanagement, arguing for self-defense or an accidental escalation during a heated argument fueled by sudden rage. However, the sheer weight and consistency of the prosecution's evidence proved too great to overcome. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, each testimony a fresh, agonizing wound for the grieving family, and a further tightening of the noose around Marcus. As the jury retired for deliberation, a heavy silence descended, filled only by the anxious shuffling of feet and whispered prayers. Hours bled into days, the community holding its collective breath, waiting for the final word. Then the announcement came sharp and definitive, cutting through the waiting silence. The jury had reached a verdict. All eyes turned to the courtroom doors, anticipating the solemn procession that would deliver the reckoning. After days of intense deliberation, the jury returned its verdict, the single word guilty echoing with a chilling finality through the hushed courtroom. Marcus Sterling was convicted of the first-degree murder of his brother Robert Sterling. A collective intake of breath, a complex mixture of exhausted relief and renewed sorrow rippled through the gallery. Clara Sterling, her face streaked with tears, embraced Elizabeth their clasp, born not of triumph, but of a profound, shattering grief for a family irrevocably broken. The arduous pursuit of legal justice had reached its end, yet the devastation remained a raw, festering wound. Facing sentencing, Marcus, ever the deceptive suspect, offered a carefully rehearsed performative apology. His words, hollow and devoid of genuine remorse, felt like a final twisted act in his long history of manipulation, cementing his true persona, even in defeat. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, ensuring his permanent removal from free society, a consequence that offered a measure of accountability for Robert's untimely end. The narrative then returned to the Sterling mansion, now steeped in an almost palpable, quiet, hauntingly empty. Its grandeur, once a vibrant symbol of power and permanence, now felt like a hollow testament to a family irrevocably shattered. The vast fortune, the undeniable source of so much contention and ultimately of bloodshed, remained, yet its very value was irrevocably tainted, a grim reminder of the immeasurable price paid. Claire and Elizabeth, in separate reflective interviews, spoke of the bitter victory. Justice had been served, they conceded, but the lingering, unanswerable questions of why would forever plague them, an unfillable void of sorrow no verdict could truly assuage. The house feels different now, Clara whispered, her gaze sweeping over the silent rooms. Every corner holds a ghost, not just Robert's, but the ghost of what we once were, what we could have been. In the hallowed halls of the Sterling estate, the narrator's voice, usually a calm, authoritative guide, now carried a deeper, almost lamenting resonance. Where ambition once reigned supreme and fraternal bonds were presumed unbreakable, a brotherhood was utterly shattered by a father's insidious secrets and a son's desperate, devouring envy. What lingered was not celebration, but a profound silence of broken bonds, a legacy forever stained by a brother's fatal hand. The story concluded, not with exultant triumph, but with a quiet, enduring tragedy, a stark reminder of the destructive power of greed and resentment, and the irreparable cost of a life undone. Beneath Sterling opulence, a patriarch's manipulative secrets and a brother's corrosive envy carved a legacy of blood and ruin. If the chilling unraveling of family betrayal and the relentless pursuit of justice for a shattered legacy truly grips you, then subscribe to the Shadow Files for more compelling true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.